The Ocean Key Resort in Key West, Florida, is known for its spectacular sunset views of the Gulf Coast. Located on the island's northwest corner, Ocean Key Resort offers a unique luxury experience for its guests and easy access to Sunset Pier, which stands on the site of one of the island's oldest piers. While not discussed by hotel staff, there have been multiple reports of Ocean Key Resort being haunted. This unknown entity is said to inhabit the third floor of the hotel and has made some guests feel less than welcome. What makes the haunting at Ocean Key Resort so unusual is that it's not an old building. Built in 1981, the hotel is one of the newer buildings in Key West. That said, the ghost of Ocean Key may have existed there long before the hotel's construction and is undoubtedly an active spirit who has a bit of fun with guests. In addition to being a stunning place to visit, Key West is full of ghost stories and creepy tales. You can learn about all of them by booking an immersive ghost tour with Southernmost Ghosts for your next trip. Before it was a luxury resort, the land where Ocean Key Resort stood was once an industrial shipping area. In the 1830s, about a decade after the United States acquired Key West, a pier was constructed in the area due to its calm, deep waters. The pier served many purposes, including the Navy's use during the Civil War and Spanish-American War. Teddy Roosevelt's troops departed from the port as they journeyed to Cuba for battle. The pier also saw a fair amount of violence as a slaughtering site for turtles and sharks. After years of dormancy, the land was purchased by developers who wanted to capitalize on the area's scenic sunset views by building a world-class hotel. Construction began on the Ocean Key Resort in 1981, and the hotel opened in 1982. It was later purchased by Noble House Resorts in 1998. The resort bills itself as a place where sunsets make history, so each of its 100 rooms has its own private balcony. The resort's location in Mallory Square, filled with shops and restaurants, makes it the perfect place for a relaxing vacation. Guests can also participate in nightly sunset celebrations on Sunset Pier. Ocean Key Resort is known for its unique style, which one general manager described as being almost too much. Each room is uniquely decorated with its own theme and bursting with color. For instance, one room is flamingo-themed with a bold pink color palette and an array of flamingo artwork. When guests arrive at the hotel, they're welcomed with a celebratory rum punch, and the lobby gives a distinctly Key West vibe. For all its bright colors and idyllic sunsets, it's somewhat surprising that Ocean Key Resort is haunted. On the other hand, the joyful and serene nature of the hotel makes the hauntings all the more unsettling. The haunting at Ocean Key Resort is said to be by one unknown ghost, although more spirits may be present. It's also not known when the hauntings first began, but guests say there's no mistaking the ghostly activity that goes on. The haunting at Ocean Key Resort takes place on the third floor. Guests have reported the sound of keys jingling, lights turning on and off by themselves, cold spots in otherwise warm rooms, and curtains being pushed by an unseen force. Guests who encounter the ghost of the hotel directly sense that it is an unhappy spirit. Long sighs are often heard, and a heavy presence can sometimes be felt standing next to guests. There have even been reports of feeling pressure on the bed at night, as if someone were sitting on it and watching guests sleep. In 2015, a guest reported coming back to their room and finding it ransacked. The hotel was certain that no one had entered the room, and it was assumed that the balcony doors had been blown open, causing the mess. However, things took a strange turn in the night when the guest heard someone clap their hands next to their ear. The guest reported, "I immediately awoke and thought I was dreaming." They turned over to check the time on their phone and suddenly felt a cold gust of air blow over them. The guest heard another clap next to their right ear, causing them to yell so loud it woke their wife. The guest claimed it was their first paranormal experience. During a stay in 2023, one guest reported a shocking experience while staying in room 317. The guest stated that when their husband got up in the middle of the night for a glass of water, he noticed someone on their balcony. Upon closer inspection, it was a woman with long blonde hair. However, she vanished instantly, and the guest could not find anyone on the balcony. It's unclear if this is the sad entity many have felt while staying on the third floor. The mystery of the ghost of Ocean Key Resort may never be solved, but its stories will live on for a long time. It could be that old energy on the land conjured this spirit to haunt a modern hotel, but that theory. Many of the world's great mysteries lie outside the United States. Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, and the Easter Island heads. Yet, that doesn't mean that the US doesn't have a few of its own truly unexplainable entities. One of the most famous has to be Coral Castle outside of Miami, Florida. Staff and paranormal investigators have confirmed that they've heard or spotted Coral Castle's creator, Edward Lidskaunen, still residing in his one-of-a-kind estate. As Lidskaunen and his years-long, seemingly impossible construction process are an enigma in itself, it's not all that surprising that his spirit hasn't wanted to move on. Edward Lidskaunen was born in Latvia in 1887. There are several stories that have been passed around about his younger years. One says that he was left at the altar when he was 26, betrothed to a 16-year-old girl who refused to marry him. He grew up on his family's farm, going to school until the 4th grade when he began working full-time on the farm. Yet, Edward's light size, 5 feet tall and weighing about 130 pounds, may have slowed him down. When he got older, Lidskaunen trained as a stonemason. It seems Lidskaunen may have also been active in politics. His brother, Otto, was a member of the Latvian Social Democratic Workers' Party and was arrested during an uprising in 1905. Otto's son believes Edward was also a member of the party, though this hasn't been proven. In 1912, Lidskaunen left Latvia and emigrated to the United States. While he first lived in New Jersey with his cousin, Lidskaunen soon hopped around the country. He lived in the Pacific Northwest for a spell, which is reportedly where he caught the illness that would plague him for the rest of his life. It was a respiratory illness, which many believe was tuberculosis. Lidskaunen then moved to a few more states before finding himself in Florida. He was found on the side of the road by Robert Moser, the founder of Florida City. Moser and his wife and daughter looked after Lidskaunen, slowly nursing him back to health. It's believed the warm air of Florida helped Lidskaunen's lungs heal. However, despite surviving the endeavor, he was a frail man for the rest of his days. This fact made his life's work even more unbelievable. Lidskaunen never married or had a family, and it seems every waking moment for 28 years was occupied by one thing: sculpting limestone. Lidskaunen found a plot in Florida City and started sculpting the rock that lay beneath the soil on his land. Lidskaunen became quite secretive about his project, building a large wall around his property so no one could see what he was doing. Even then, did he know he was onto something spectacular? Or did he not want others to see his otherworldly help? This all begs the question: what's so special about the Coral Castle anyway? Several things, in fact, make it awe-inspiring. When you add up the weight of all the stones that Lidskaunen sculpted, chiseled, and most importantly moved, it totals 2.2 million pounds. That's 1,110 tons. It's not like these are a bunch of small pieces of limestone of manageable weight stacked on top of each other, either. The group included a 9-ton gate, multiple walls weighing upwards of 6 tons, and a 28-ton obelisk. This project would be remarkable by modern-day standards with a team of engineers. In fact, some construction crews have tried to replicate what Lidskaunen single-handedly accomplished in his backyard. The crew tried to slice a coral rock slab with a diamond-tipped power saw and lift it with a 600-horsepower crane. Even they struggled with the process. So how did a chronically ill man measuring 5 feet manage to create this work of art? That's the million-dollar question. No one ever saw Lidskaunen working despite his construction project drawing quite a bit of attention. Lidskaunen managed to keep his working habits a secret throughout the multi-decade project. It said that one night, he pulled up to a quarry to load several tons of coral into his truck. The foreman laughed him off, but Lidskaunen simply asked him to turn his back. Not long after, the foreman glanced out and saw that Lidskaunen's truck was full of the stone. Lidskaunen claimed that he was able to accomplish such superhuman feats by applying the building techniques of ancient civilizations, which he closely studied in his downtime. Lidskaunen was also self-taught in physics, which he said aided him in his building. But what's perhaps most unbelievable is that Lidskaunen didn't just do this once. He built his rock empire, then moved it 10 miles away. Lidskaunen thought Florida City was getting too crowded, so he decided to move his masterpiece north. It took him 3 years, but again, no one saw him move the giant stones. Many are in the camp that Lidskaunen could physically not have done this on his own. They believe he had the help of the alien variety, who used their superior technology to move the rocks efficiently and quickly. Lidskaunen seemed to enjoy being a local mystery, and refused to share or show anyone how he built his stone palace during his lifetime, though he did invite people to walk around his estate for a small fee. Many believe that Lidskaunen never left the place he dedicated many years to creating. Paranormal investigators set up shop in the 2-story stone building where Lidskaunen lived for 11 years after completing his castle, without electricity or water. Here, they've captured strange electromagnetic fluctuations and recorded a voice speaking back to them when they ask Lidskaunen questions. There are other strange entities said to be present at the Coral Castle. Near the 30-ton lensless telescope pointed at the North Star, people say they feel a strong energy. On the whole site, in fact, people can experience an energy they can't quite explain. Some say this could be attributed to energy vortexes at play around the castle. They believe Lidskalnin found a very particular place to build where he could make the most. Cemeteries as a whole have always been bound to the ethereal and otherworldly. Their very designs and many of their customs and idiosyncrasies are directly linked to the supernatural. They are havens and cabinets of curiosity for superstitions and bizarre rituals, most meant to keep the forces of darkness at bay or at least preoccupied. Located at 1800 Northeast 2nd Avenue, this National Register of Historic Places holder has a rather bizarre chronology. The first recorded funeral was of a white man named Graham Branscombe, a 24-year-old Englishman who perished of consumption in 1897. However, it should be noted that way before Graham bit the big one and was buried on the spot, the land was already being used as a gravesite by the 100 or so African American and Black Bahamians that can form the unincorporated Miami population. Sadly, there are no records of who they are. One of the most distinctive qualities of the cemetery is that it is one of the few of its kind where the owners of the plot hold a deed to the land where the plot is situated. The only way someone can get buried is if they either have a deed or can prove a familial relationship. As such, it is an upper-crust cemetery whose inhabitants past, present, and future are basically a who's who of Miami history. The headstones and mausoleums embellish this fact and try to highlight the pedigree of its inhabitants. The City of Miami Cemetery is a madhouse of hauntings. There are many ghosts in this place, and that's only some of the otherworldly mayhem that's crawling around. Julia Tuttle was an American businesswoman who owned the property on which Miami was built. That's why she's referred to as the Mother of Miami. Ever since she died in 1898, many people who have visited her memorial marker at the cemetery swear that they can feel the presence of another person, someone watching over them. Her spirit has been spotted various times by vandals and thrill seekers breaking into the cemetery at night. Carrie Barrett Miller. By far, it is the strangest grave on the site. When Carrie died, her husband bought an altar, placed her body over it, and then just poured concrete over her corpse. No 6 feet under, no casket, he just went and sealed her up in a bivouac cement sculpture for all the world to see. Her tombstone reads, "The body of Carrie Barrett Miller was molded in the solid block of concrete. December 4, 1926. Her sleeping form will remain after the body has gone to dust." With that epithet, is it any wonder that people swear that every so often, they hear scratching sounds coming from inside? The military section. 125 historical landmarks believed to have a spiritual je ne sais quoi. At night, the custodians like to turn a blind eye to this section of the cemetery. Grave robbers. "Please, stop entering the crypt," is just one of many notes found on one of the many graves in the cemetery. Grave robbers are one of the main concerns troubling the staff of the joint. Most come at night, desecrating the tombs and running off with bones and valuables. There's a black market trade for body parts and skeletons. The loftier and more important the body it comes from, the steeper the price they can get. The Deering family represented the 19th century American dream, adorned with all the trappings of generational wealth and a legacy of business success. Charles Deering became interested in the area when the family began wintering in the subtropical humidity and heat of southern Florida in the late 19th century. One property, however, and the choice of where to build it, would make the Deering estate a magnet for otherworldly activity and the birthplace of 1,000 tales from beyond the grave. The Deering family's farm equipment empire had already created generational wealth for William Deering's entrepreneurial sons. No branch on the family tree could have foreseen the seeds they would plant when Charles Deering bought Richmond Cottage near Miami and began building structures on the estate. The plot seems ripped from the weathered pages of a Hollywood script, but the narrative holds true. The living should not disturb the dead. In building on an ancient burial ground, the Deerings and those before them did just that. The humidity and wildlife of southern Florida can be brutal in equal measure. But the promise of a life in the sun has always proved too tempting for many. Palmetto Bay has been home to humans since the times of ancient Native Americans. Charles Deering, a wealthy Chicago industrialist, decided to carve out his slice of that promise in 1913. Deering set about realizing his vision of tranquility and beauty. purchasing an 1890s pioneer structure, Richmond House, and the property surrounding it. The Deering family's wealth afforded a level of grandeur and opulence that allowed Charles to indulge in his passion for art collection. After remodeling Richmond House into the stunning home that stands today, a beautiful revivalist Mediterranean home was erected adjacent to House's collection in the relative safety of a stone structure. This was no hobbyist ensemble, with works by Rembrandt, Goya, and El Greco amongst the priceless pieces. While Deering built chapels to great art, thousands flowed down from the north as the ever-burgeoning Miami-Dade County saw a tide of progress. Deering, however, sought to hold back that tide. Deering's yacht was once nestled in the property's boat basin, but today, the crystal waters are home to manatees. It's ironic, perhaps, that when Charles Deering passed away in 1927, over half a century passed with almost no change. While nature's introduction of manatees merely enhanced the tranquility and love of Deering's land, Richmond House, like its Art Temple counterpart and the other structures on the estate, remains pristine and beautifully maintained. Deering's vision of blocking out the world in this oasis on the coast was purified further. When the estate passed from the Deering family to the state of Florida, it protected Deering's vision of beauty and abundance for all that followed. Progress is a cruel mistress. While ancient artifacts such as shell tools and fossils have been unearthed, discoveries of a different kind on the estate have given rise to far more chilling encounters. 19th century settlers on what is now the Deering estate would regularly find human remains while adjusting the landscape to suit their purpose. Today, this spot is known as the Cutler Burial Mound. Ancient Native American bodies were ceremonially laid to rest in this spot. Even before the times of Charles Deering and Richmond House, bones were regularly dug up and casually tossed aside. What would, by today's standards, seem unthinkable was common practice. The resting places of so many souls were damaged and desecrated time and time again. The estate is now awash with unnerving tales and sightings. The ghost of a small boy is often seen in the dining area, believed to mischievously move furniture around. Investigators talked to staff, who said that of all the rooms, Deering's study has proved to be a magnet for spooky activity. Infrared cameras have recorded orbs of light moving across rooms and through closed windows. Even camera crews themselves have reported ghosts in the machine with equipment behaving abnormally. Night security on the estate speak of the apparition of a man being pushed in a wheelchair on the veranda. Deering may indeed have taken his fondness for Biscayne Bay with him to the afterlife. The disturbed graves of the indigenous peoples are always in the thoughts of those trying to peer beyond the veil of the living on the grounds. One truly shocking image taken on the grounds shows a fully formed bodily apparition of a tribal figure roughly 100 feet from the photographer, standing tall, watching on. Whether a true believer or a hardened skeptic, Charles Deering's Floridian oasis proves an attractive draw for ghost hunters and those in search of the opulent beauty Deering himself so clearly laid out. The buildings themselves are so pristinely maintained that they seem permanently ready for Mr. Deering's imminent arrival. Visitors to the estate describe the joy of wandering the grounds both during the day and during more ominous hours. One TripadVisor.com review states, "It is very peaceful and beautiful. If you want a place to walk and be calm, this is the place." Another visitor notes the more eerie aspect of the estate. It was scary and atmospheric. Charles Deering's love of the land and focused efforts to hold back the rising sprawl of the surrounding Miami-Dade County have resulted in an abundance of wildlife and endangered plants on the grounds. If you could build a house any way you wanted right by the beach, how would you build it? The Villa Paul located on Miami Avenue stands today as an answer to that question. Dubbed the Jewel of Miami, this historic structure is beloved for its role in Miami's history and its unique Latin identity, serving originally as a Cuban consulate. Much more than that, it was a standing work of art its original owners could call home. That is, until death knocked unexpectedly on its door. Now serving as a venue and art gallery, Villa Paula is believed to be home to a number of inexplicable happenings, strange sounds and violent entities. It adds one more thing to the list of what Villa Paula makes Miami famous for: ghosts. Here's a lot more than art that lives on at Villa Paula. Once a Cuban consulate and beloved home, this standing work of art is loaded with otherworldly spirits that aren't ready to move out. Read on and see why this jewel of Miami is a cherished landmark that sends chills down the spines of passers-by. History of Villa Paula. The first Cuban consulate was already established in Miami in 1916, with Miguel Cavalera as consul. It was at the request of a group of Miami lumber merchants who were exporting their products to Cuba for several years. A series of transfers was then set in motion in 1925, resulting in Domingo J. Millard being its new consul. The son of a cigar manufacturer, Millard began his professional career in the manufacturing business. He was later appointed Chancellor of the Cuban Consulate in Key West in 1913, during which time he served as the Vice Consul for Spain. Millard was then appointed Consul in 1919. The Cuban government built a new house for him in 1926 after his arrival in Miami, the only building in Miami to this day that is directly associated with the Cuban government. In fact, everything about the house, down to the laborers and materials, is Cuban. It was designed by Havana-based architect C. Frera, with its finished neoclassical style arguably being the inspiration of Millard's wife Paula. A Cuban-born opera singer, Paula wanted to create a haven for artistic expression and opulent living. Millard then named the newly built house after her. Its name was forever etched into the marble above its front entrance. Helen M. Reardon purchased the house from Millard in 1930 and lived in it with her 2 daughters until 1970. It was purchased by the house's present owners in 1974 and designated as a historic site in June 1983. Today, Villa Paula stands magnificent as ever as an art museum, venue, and as what many have dubbed as the Jewel of Miami. Once a foreshadowing of the city's development as an international city, it stands as a reminder of its deep Cuban and Latin American roots. A series of strange noises and aromas have been prevalent at Villa Paula since its present owners took over. Click-clacking could be heard on the stone path outside, as if someone was walking around with high heels, possibly Paula. A steady knock would also be heard intermittently on the front door, with no one on the other end when greeted. At other times, noises would go from creepy to violent. The owner's bedroom door would slam shut on its own. It said that Paula would shut the bedroom door so she wouldn't feel a draft on her shoulders when she would play the piano. There was also one day when the owner's ghostly roommate threw a fit. He heard a loud clatter in the kitchen, and when he went down to investigate, he saw dishes and silverware thrown all over. A front porch chandelier also suddenly came loose from its socket and loudly crashed onto the floor below. He would also smell the strong aroma of Cuban coffee brewing from the kitchen at random times. In the dining room, the owner would smell roses, even during the season when they weren't blooming. The owner also had a couple of occasions where he saw apparitions. One was a shadowy form out of the corner of his eye. He turned to look at it, but disappeared. He saw another apparition in the hallway by the bedrooms one day. This time, it appeared to be a Cuban woman with her pitch-black hair pulled back tightly in a bun. She swished down the hall happily in a full-length gown with only one leg, until she eventually faded into thin air. We may have forgotten to mention that Paula died due to complications from a leg amputation. This is one of those haunts where you wish you could go back in time and ask its former residents what the big deal is. Unfortunately, we can't, and all we can do, the owners at least, is adjust to living with these spectral tenants, who apparently have a festering hatred towards cats. The present owner's last 3 cats were all deliberately killed by a slamming iron gate. What makes it weird is that on all 3 occasions, there was no wind strong enough to slam the gate. From the way it appeared, it seemed as though someone or something would wait for the moment when the cat would. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe button, and as always, until next time.